The Texas justice system is messy, so let's break it down. You're listening to So You Got Arrested, the podcast that tells you what really happens after an arrest. Hosted by BRIC criminal defense attorneys, we talk to the people who've lived it, worked in it, and been shaped by it. Whether you're facing charges or just want to understand your rights, your options, and the smart moves that could change everything, we've got your back.
So welcome to So You Got Arrested. This is a BRIC Criminal Defense podcast. Jacob, I'm very excited today. We have Kirsta Melton here on the podcast joining us. I had never met Kirsta prior to today, but I've always heard of her. She is, from what I've heard, a fantastic prosecutor. And I think I may have paid her the ultimate compliment when I was telling her that I've heard other defense attorneys say, I've got Kirsta on the other side. I'm in for a tough case. So, which is a very big compliment, in my opinion.
Wow. So I definitely don't want her as the prosecutor in one of our cases.
There you go. There you go. She's made quite the name for herself. Okay. So Kirsta, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm a 25-year prosecutor. I spent about 15 years in Bexar County in the Family Justice and Victim Protection Unit, handling child sexual abuse, child physical abuse, adult sex cases, family violence, from assault to capital murder, human trafficking. And then when I left the DA's office, I went to the Attorney General's office and I created the human trafficking and transnational organized crime section there and handled those types of cases around the state, handled the legislative agenda for the state on the issue of human trafficking. We did full-length documentary on human trafficking that's still used as a training tool. And we also worked on training folks on human trafficking all over the state.
So these cases that you've handled throughout your career, these, the family violence cases, child sex cases, murders, human trafficking, those are very heavy cases. I imagine that kind of stuff, that's a lot to carry around. That's kind of stuff that weighs on you. When you were growing up, did you know that you wanted to go into law?
Well, my dad told me I was going to be a lawyer, and I told him, of course, I was not going to be a lawyer.
Was that because you argued a lot as a kid? Or?
Well, that was because when I was, turning 12 and 13, I was of the view that, I knew what was going to happen.
There you go.
And I knew it far better than anybody else.
Sure.
So I told him no. And then my dad was a lawyer in the military. Okay. He was a JAG attorney.
Oh, wow.
And he ended up passing away when I was 13 after a temporary duty assignment in a car accident. And eventually I went to Cornell undergrad, and I was either going to become a marine biologist or a lawyer.
So you already knew in college, hey, I think I might want to be an attorney. Yeah,
well, maybe. And then, and so ultimately, I chose to become a government major, then worked for a couple of years afterwards at the Department of Justice, and then went on to UT Law.
So why not marine biologist?
I was an undergrad chem major in preparation for that, and I did not enjoy calculus. Chem was fine. I did not enjoy the underlying calculus. Right. And so my advisor, who was an astrophysicist, was like, do you just not like calculus? And I said, no, calculus does not like me. And I became a government major.
There you go.
And loved it.
Calculus at Cornell. I can't imagine that was an easy course either.
Yes. Everyone in my class had already had calculus, so it was a review for them.
Right.
I had never had calculus, so it was not a review for me.
And so you said, hey, law is the way to go.
Yeah. Yes.
And so you end up going to law school. While you were in law school, did you know that you wanted to get into some area of criminal law?
Absolutely.
Okay. Was that because of your father's influence, or?
I do think that was probably my dad's influence. He did both criminal defense and prosecution as a JAG attorney, because you get pulled in both directions when you're with the military. And so I was exposed to both kind of growing up, and I knew criminal law was my area of interest in the law. And when I was in law school, I thought I wanted to be a criminal defense attorney.
Okay.
And so my third year at UT, I took the criminal defense clinic, and I actually went to trial.
Wow. And what kind of case was it?
It was an assault case. My first defendant was a guy named Billy Arnold, and he was found not guilty.
Wow.
In our
law
case,
student.
As a law student.
That's great.
Yeah. I don't think he did it.
Wow.
I don't think they should have charged him.
Well, the jury didn't think so either.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So, coming out of law school, you had said, hey, my initial inclination was to be a criminal defense attorney. You ended up becoming a prosecutor. Kind of walk us through that.
I did. So my husband and I moved to Washington, D.C. after law school. We met in law school, got married, eloped in law school. And then we moved to D.C. I took a job with an antitrust firm, Morgan, Lewis & Bockius, doing antitrust defense work.
Very different from criminal law.
Yes, but that's what I had done at the Department of Justice. It was actually criminal antitrust enforcement. And so I worked there for about a year and then decided that law firm life was not for me.
Right.
Yeah, it's a different life.
Yeah. And so the DA's office in San Antonio was hiring, and they said they would take me. So I took a $70,000 pay cut.
Right.
And
That's a part of it.
We moved back to San Antonio, and I started as a misdemeanor in Bexar County.
So had you lived in San Antonio previously?
I went to high school in San Antonio.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I went to San Antonio Christian School.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so coming back to San Antonio, that wasn't a huge change. You had already lived here. And so you start at the Bexar County DA's office, and I'm assuming at first you were a misdemeanor prosecutor?
I did. I did 6 months in misdemeanor and handled what misdemeanor prosecutors do. So we did DWIs, we did criminal trespasses. We were a brand new court. So all of the other courts got to dump their cases that they didn't want and the attorneys they didn't want to deal with in our court. And so we learned, James and I learned by trial by fire, and we did a lot of cases, and they sent felony first chairs to sit with us, a different one each week to kind of help us cull the docket and also to teach us as we went through trial. And so it was super powerful time for me in terms of learning.
So is that back in the time when they had what they call sister courts?
Yes.
And then they've done away with that since then. And I know a lot of people are in favor of reinstituting that policy.
For sure. I greatly learned from my felony sister court. And so they actually sent us a different felony first chair for a month, and then we had our sister court on top of that.
And just so the listeners know, the idea of a sister court is you have a lower level misdemeanor court that's tied to a higher level district court. And so you get these felony prosecutors coming in and working with the misdemeanor prosecutors and training them.
And you learn by doing.
Right.
And so they sat with us. They kept us from the worst mistakes. They taught us as we went, and it's called the practice of law for a reason, right? You learn it as you go, and they were there to help teach that.
And so you moved from misdemeanor prosecutor to felony prosecutor, and is that when you got into the family violence cases?
Correct. That's when I went to the Family Justice and Victim Protection Unit and under Catherine Babbitt, and I had the opportunity there to work with incredible lawyers, many of whom are still practicing in San Antonio today on both sides of the bar, and had the opportunity, obviously, to work on cases that were extremely meaningful in terms of their impact on the victim and what we were standing for.
Yeah, one of the things that I don't think people really understand is on each side, the defense side and the prosecution, a lot of these cases, especially cases involving family violence or child sexual abuse allegations, they're very heavy cases. They weigh on you. It's not a 9-to-5 job. You don't clock out at 5 and all of a sudden you're not thinking about that case. No. That case stays with you when you go home at night. It's the case. It's what you think about when you wake up at 2:30 in the morning. I mean, it really does kind of weigh on you a little bit. How do you deal with that, or how did you deal with that at the time?
Well, for me, people ask me that all the time. Like, how do you live in this space for a long time? And so one, I view it as you are equipped to do what God calls you to do. And I was in that space, and I was given what I needed to do that work. And part of it too is knowing that work is that heavy and carrying that responsibility, but also then finding ways to remember that there is good in the world and there are good people all around you. And so again, for me, that's my faith. That was my family. I have 2 kids and a husband. We've been married for 28 years, and that's remembering. So there's some days you come home and you do feel all of that weight. And so that was a kids were going to eat junk food and watch Disney movies, and mom's going to hold you and just be happy. Right. And then the other thing for me is, I think, being with friends and colleagues, people who know and can talk about those things in a way that kind of takes some of that burden off, and then being outdoors. I love just being
something about being in the sun.
Absolutely. And just having the beauty around you just reminds you, yes, it is not all of this way.
Now, you were at the Bexar County DA's office, and then at some point you ended up at the Texas Attorney General's office.
Correct.
And when you went to the Texas Attorney General's office, your focus was on human trafficking, right?
Yes.
Had you already started that prior to leaving the Bexar County DA's office?
Yes. I started the unit at the Bexar County DA's office. I was the first human trafficking prosecutor here, and I handled some of the very first human trafficking cases in the state of Texas. And so I did that for about 2 years until the end of Susan Reed's term.
Okay.
And that's when I left and went to the Attorney General's office. I was there for about a year as a grant prosecutor. And then I started the Human Trafficking and Transnational Organized Crime section.
So what made you decide, like, hey, this problem is so pervasive, in the Bexar County area that we should start a unit? Like, we need to put some resources towards these types of cases?
Really, it was starting to work the cases. And when you start working those cases, you realize, one, these are victims that have an enormous amount of complex trauma over a series of events in their lives. They require a lot of investment in terms of interview time, relationship building time, and rebuilding of trust. I think that's one thing that both the defense and the state share is you've got people on both sides, whether it's victims or whether it's defendants, who have lost faith in the system, who don't believe that the system is going to work for them, give them a fair shake, and that we're going to actually have justice. And so I think on trafficking cases, that's really, really core to many of our victims. And so you have to invest a lot of time. They're also very complex cases, and the evidence is complex, and working through all of that and figuring out, can we try this case if our victim's uncooperative? Can we figure out how to make this an evidence-based prosecution that does not rely upon the victim's testimony solely?
Almost like family violence cases to an extent.
To an extent
you might get a
where
wife
you can.
who may not want to testify.
And
correct.
I think that's so was the human trafficking just a part of the family justice division, and that's what made you want to split, was just the differences and the complexities that come with the human trafficking?
Yeah, I was still under the family justice unit. I told my bosses at the time, I was like, look, I am being pulled in too many directions. I cannot do any of them well. I would like to focus in this area, and I'm going to ask you to allow me to do that. Okay. And they did, recognizing that this was an area that was growing. It's not necessarily that the crime numbers were growing, but we were starting to recognize it, starting to address it, identify it, investigate it, and move it forward. And so needed personnel and resources who had that capacity. The reason I have any connection to human trafficking is that one day in 2009, my mother sent my sisters and I a book, David Batstone's book on human trafficking, and said, girls, we've talked about doing something about injustice, and I think we need to work on human trafficking. And my family founded what has become Truckers Against Trafficking, which is a nationwide 501c3 dedicated to the education, empowerment, and mobilization of the trucking, busing, and oil and gas industries in the fight against trafficking. And that's when my mom said, hey, do you have any of those cases over there at the Bexar County DA's office? And I'm like, I don't know. Let me ask.
Right.
And eventually those cases ended up on my desk.
Wow. So it's like a family calling almost.
It is. It is in many ways, yes.
So I see we're coming up on the break. I have a lot of questions for you, but we can get to them after the break. This is So You Got Arrested. We're here with Kirsta Melton. We'll be back after the break.
The attorneys at Brick Criminal Defense have helped over 5,000 clients move on with their lives. When an arrest or accusation turns your life upside down, we have the knowledge, experience, and integrity to get your life back on track. Traditional legal ethics, modern legal tactics. The best defense possible to get you through the criminal justice system. Search Brick Criminal Defense to see our reviews and find out why so many of our clients have trusted us to fight for them. Brick Criminal Defense, helping our clients move on with their lives.
So we're back, and we were talking about human trafficking, and you were talking about how at the Bexar County DA's office, this became a focus for you. Was there any difference once you were at the Bexar County DA's office and you said, hey, we kind of need a dedicated unit or a dedicated person and some resources in the way that you were able to prosecute these things while still being within the Bexar County DA's office?
Well, at the DA's office, was not alone. We ended up with a team. So it was me and Ryan Wright.
Oh, yes.
Originally.
I know Ryan.
Yeah. And then we have an advocate, Stacia Rogers, and Joseph Piet was our investigator.
Yes.
So we had a full team.
Joseph's a very good investigator.
And when I went to the Attorney General's office, the difference there was the number of cases decreases. So when you're at a DA's office, you have a larger flow of cases. And then, of course, there's being a senior person in the Family Justice and Victim Protection Unit, I was continuing to be involved in other cases that were outside of human trafficking.
Right.
At the AG's office, human trafficking was my sole focus, but I was able to work on multiple aspects of that across things. So cases, yes, but also working with other state agencies, also working on legislation, working on training, working with different cities on these issues. So it kind of was a narrower area, but a broader area in other ways.
So did that unit already exist at the Texas Attorney General's office when you moved into it?
It did not.
So
no.
you were kind of at the forefront of, hey, I think this is necessary.
Yeah, there was a grant position for one prosecutor. And then I was given the opportunity to expand and to create the unit.
And what would be the difference between a human trafficking case going to the Bexar County District Attorneys versus the Attorney General's office?
I think now there's more offices that know about human trafficking and that have prosecutors who have tried some of these cases. So the Attorney General's office is excellent when you don't necessarily have that expertise, and they do. You can then borrow from their expertise. You can also borrow from more resources in terms of money or investigators or the ability to process certain types of evidence more quickly, things like that, investment of time and resources. When you have your own office, right, that actually has that level of expertise, those aren't typically the folks who are calling on the Attorney General's office, because they already have that.
Right.
And so in areas like Bexar County, since you were, I'm assuming they still have a unit that
yes, they do.
Okay, okay. And so it seems as if you went to the Texas Attorney General's office, you're working on human trafficking, and then since that time, you've actually started an organization that also deals with human trafficking. Can you tell us about that?
I left the Attorney General's office at the end of 2019, and I started the Institute to Combat Trafficking, which is a small 501c where I can serve as a special assistant district attorney for jurisdictions that ask. I also do training. I write curriculum. I train professionals, members of the public. I've published a book on the investigation of human trafficking. And so it allows me a lot of freedom and flexibility in terms of my time and schedule. And I still do a lot of what I did when I was at the Attorney General's office, where I consult with law enforcement. I work with victim serving agencies and their victims who have issues related to criminal law and want that court sort of information to help those individuals. And then I travel around the state and I do a lot of training.
That was going to be my next question is, when you were at the Texas Attorney General's office, I mean, what was the scope of the cases that you were handling? I imagine we're talking about human trafficking, there may be things that are statewide, networks that are statewide or...
One of the biggest networks, right, was Backpage.com. So Backpage was the single largest purveyor of escort ads in the country for a good period of time. And we were the Texas piece of a multi-state and federal investigation that brought down Backpage.com. Wow. And so my team handled that on the Texas side.
Right.
And so that was a multi-year, very, very large and intensive investigation, and one that we were thrilled to be a part of. I mean, it took down Backpage in more than, I think, 90 countries when they shut it down. And it certainly doesn't end human trafficking, but it was something where we said, guess what? You don't get to continue making tens of millions of dollars on the backs of people who are trafficked.
Right, right. And so since that time, you've started your own group. You said you do trainings. My understanding is you train prosecutors.
We do.
What do you train prosecutors on?
I train prosecutors, one, on what is human trafficking, and then two, how do we get these cases in a place that they are triable? And what is the strategy we use? How are we structuring our voir dire? What are we doing in terms of our themes? What are we doing in terms of our witness order? Just really nuts and bolts, core things
from beginning to end.
From beginning to end, and how we work these cases through.
And you mentioned writing the book about investigating these crimes, starting from the beginning, and you talked about how sometimes those victims aren't going to come forward. So that investigation is the most important part in proving a case without those victims. What are the complexities in dealing with those cases on the investigation part of it?
So on the investigation side, I think the biggest thing is actually generating those cases, because these victims are not often calling the police themselves. So they remain locked in exploitation for a far longer period of time than they would normally be. And so police need to be actively looking for these victims, and also being willing to have good relationships with vulnerable communities within their greater community, so that those people feel that they can come forward and actually speak on behalf of those victims. So if they'll come forward, right, then the police can initiate those investigations. I think the other major complexity is that lack of trust in the system, which is significant. People struggle with the criminal justice system.
Sure. And we're going to have you on for our next episode, because I would love to get into detail on human trafficking with you. In my opinion, you're the expert here in the state of Texas on the subject. But one of the reasons that we have you on today is because you're actually running for district attorney, and that's in Hays County. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, I am the independent candidate for the Hays County Criminal District Attorney. We just had a primary. There's one Democrat who is running against me, and there's no Republican. This is really a race for what justice should be. And in my view and in my experience, justice should be independent. We should be making decisions about cases based on the facts and the law. It should not have to do with politics or status, whether that's of the defendant or the victim. It shouldn't have to do with race or ethnicity or gender or anything else. We should be basing it solely on the facts and the law, and what we can prove and what we can't, and what is just. And so that's at the core of why I'm running for Hays County District Attorney.
And I saw that, one of the kind of issues that is near and dear to you is transparency. And so, what do you mean by transparency when you say, hey, this is an important thing for me? Kind of tell me about that.
I think one of the hardest things when you're talking about the criminal justice system is that it seems like a black box for a lot of people.
People don't understand it.
Right. People don't understand it. And then a lot of information gets pulled in and very little comes back out. And I think that district attorneys' offices, as public servants, have an obligation to share information with the community. How many sexual assaults do we have that are being filed in our community? What are we doing with those? How many of those are we rejecting? How many of those are we resolving through a plea? How many of these are we going to trial on? Are we treating defendants the same for the same types of crimes across neighborhoods? Or are there differences in how we're treating those? And those are things that we as prosecutors should be looking at to say, is there something that's entering into our calculation here that shouldn't be entering into our calculation?
Even unintentionally.
Correct. When we're making plea offers. I think we need to be using data to figure out how to appropriately distribute resources in our office?
Right.
Meaning, do we have people doing things that, frankly, they could be doing other things more effectively to get cases from point A to point B more quickly, right? That delay in the justice system, it hurts victims, it hurts defendants because people's lives stop while these cases are ongoing.
Right.
And are we evaluating cases well? So I think part of that transparency piece for me is saying to the community, we want to give information back to you. You're asking us to hold the community accountable to the rule of law. That's our obligation. But we need to be accountable to the members of our community as well. And that's part of rebuilding the trust that is broken when we talk about the broken trust with the criminal justice system.
Right. And so what spurred you on to decide, hey, I want to go ahead and run for public office? Because that's not something you undertake lightly.
No, it is not. No, I had some trusted people who suggested it to me. I thought about it a long time. I obviously spent a long time talking to my husband about it, and talking to some other people that I trust. And I'm at a place in my career and with my family that I feel that I can invest the time that is necessary. And I also feel that I've had the experience that is necessary. And I look back over 25 years as a prosecutor and 28 years as a lawyer, and I look back at me as a young prosecutor, and I think about the things that I've learned since then and the change in my perspective over time. And I know that there is a need for people of integrity to step up and go through a process, which is definitely not always fun.
Right.
For the opportunity to serve in a way that is that inspires trust from people in the community.
And the reason I asked that question about making the decision to run is because a lot of times the elected DA, that's a tough position. I mean, you're never going to please everyone.
Correct.
You're going to get criticized no matter what you do. And so it's not for people who are thin-skinned because you're going to get criticism.
And that's true. But if you are a prosecutor who has had to stand their ground many a day over the course of time, then you're used to taking that critique. And unfortunately, we live in a society today where I think oftentimes people struggle to keep things at a professional level. And that's one thing I've learned over the course of my career. If you're attacking me personally, then something's wrong with your case.
Right.
I can withstand your attack by simply being quiet and then doing my job and doing my job well. And I think that is an important part of being an elected district attorney, is knowing when to simply listen, to be quiet, and then to stand on what you think is right.
Right.
And to move forward.
And I think, the idea of transparency helps in that regard, because a lot of times when I see people criticizing prosecutors or a DA's office, a lot of times it's because they don't understand the process or they don't understand, well, why did this person only get this sentence, and maybe it's a jury that gave it, or maybe there was something wrong with the case that they weren't aware of, some missing piece of evidence.
Absolutely.
And so I think there might just be a lack of understanding.
I think also there is this, I think people want to believe again in our institutions, but we have to make them worthy of that belief.
Sure. Yeah. And so if people are interested in your positions on issues or just want to learn more about you, how can they do that?
They can do that by going to kirstamelton.com. We have all of our policy positions on the website, and you're welcome to take a look. We will also be having multiple events where people can contact me directly. And if you want to learn more, contact us. We are super excited to talk to people. And
if what could people expect if they elected you as DA? Like what expectations should they have?
You should have an expectation that I will stand for what is right, that I will train the prosecutors under me to do the same, that we will constantly pursue the top levels of professionalism, that we will seek justice not solely for victims, but for defendants and for the entire community, and that we will do that with a level of professionalism that you can be incredibly proud of.
Well, like I said, prior to meeting you, I had heard about your reputation, and your reputation was that you're fantastic at what you do. You know the law. You handle yourself in a professional manner. So I have no doubt that'll be true. Is there anything else you'd like the people to know about you before we sign off?
No, I'm very grateful for the opportunity to be here.
Thank you for coming on.
Maybe I don't want you as a prosecutor on my case. It's going to be a tough case for me. Soon enough, it's going to be her whole office that I don't want across the table from me. So
right.
We'll see what happens.
So this is So You Got Arrested with Brick Criminal Defense with Kirsta Melton and Jacob Lindberg and Steve Barrera. Thank you for listening.
Thanks for listening to So You Got Arrested. If you found this podcast helpful, share it with someone who needs to hear it. For more legal insights and real talk from the front lines of the Texas justice system, follow us and subscribe. And remember, Brick Criminal Defense has your back. For more information, visit us at brckdefense.com.